of the microbiome or of the immune system can affect disease. For example, initially, when we were looking at differences between the gut microbiota between healthy babies and babies with food allergies, we were looking only at analyzing their stools. And us and many other centers found differences in the gut microbiota. But then we moved into functional studies. We looked into the mice. And what we found was that if you take specific bacteria that were derived from healthy people, and we put them into a highly allergic mouse model that can develop severe allergic reaction, it's called anaphylaxis, there is actually complete protection from anaphylaxis. It was both if you want to prevent food allergy or if you want to treat food allergy. But at the time, these bacteria are still not available to use clinically. So what was available was fecal transplantation. So we just took the stools from healthy babies and we put them into a highly allergic mouse model, and it prevented anaphylaxis. When we put the stools from food allergic babies, there was no protection from anaphylaxis. So then we were like, so what's happening? What is happening there? And then we looked into the immune system. And what we found is that these bacteria upregulate cells called regulatory T cells and specific subtypes of regulatory T cells called ROR gamma T positive regulatory T cells. Regulatory T cells, I'm sure you heard about them because the Nobel Prize this year was given to investigators who evaluated the regulatory T cells. And one of the investigators was actually mentions the work of this person, Talal Shatila, was mentioned in the Nobel Prize summary. He's spent his life working on regulatory T cells. So in his lab, we actually found that these cells are critical for food allergy. We did not stop at that. Now we actually published a paper in Nature, and we discovered a novel mechanism in food allergy. Goblet cells, which are epithelial cells, they produce a protein called RELM beta. And when RELM beta gets high in food allergic patients, what happens is that the microbiome gets affected. And as you mentioned, the microbiome creates the metabolites that are important for health. And these metabolites decrease. There are indole metabolites go down. If we actually abrogate RELM beta in the highly allergic mouse model, there is no anaphylaxis. So we actually have moved a lot between 2013, when we were interested in the microbiome, and now we're doing fecal transplantation studies in humans. We started this in 2015, and now we are at the third trial. We started the phase 1 trial. We found a signal. 40% of patients had an increase in their dose of reactivity to peanut, from traces to 2 to 3 peanuts. And now we are doing a phase 2 trials in teens using a highly concentrated fecal transplant material. It contains less than 1% fecal material. It's important for patients to know. So this is where we are. And I think this is a great illustration because you can apply it also to other diseases.
Yeah. I should have said, Dr. Rashid, you are the director of the food allergy program at Boston Children's. So thank you for being here. Mm-hmm. Dr. Kimes, I'd like to start with you for this next question. You're the founder and CEO of Shielta Therapeutics, and then maybe everybody can chime in. But how can we train our microbiome through diet, and why isn't diet enough to prevent food allergies or to treat them?
I love this question. So think about something you like a lot. Most of us like coffee, right? Have you ever actually eaten a coffee bean? It's not so great. But when you go through specific processes, you can turn it into something that is very enjoyable. Our microbiome is the processing center for the raw food or raw material, which is the food that we are consuming. And like most good things, you need both good raw materials and good processing to have positive outcomes that you're looking for. If there is a mismatch there, it is dysregulation and has consequences that are negative. So on the food side of the equation, you can have instances where you are consuming a single food, but we have different processing centers and it is going to be processed in a different way. We use linoleic acid as a really good example that we've been able to show in studies in infants that is dysregulated between those that develop allergic diseases and those that do not. Linoleic acid is something that's in a lot of formulas. It's in most people's diets, including infants and children. And depending on the microbes in your gut, it can be processed either into a polyunsaturated fatty acid which is typically an anti-inflammatory molecule, or it can be oxidized into an oxalipid, and that is an inflammatory molecule. So you need both the right input and the right microbial system that's going to metabolize those foods into the proper materials for stimulating the immune system, hopefully in that first year of life towards immune tolerance and away from an inflammatory response. Okay, so really it's about matching the two, and you always want to start with the best raw materials you can. So, you know, natural whole foods is where we should all be aiming to go. But then you do need the right processing center. And sometimes that is disrupted for many different reasons, from environmental factors to the drugs that we consume to transference from our family members, you know, all different ways in which we really impact our own microbiomes that will influence how that works.
I would add that, for example, plant-based food, as you mentioned, it will in the high fibers, they will increase short chain fatty acids, and they are important, very important for the epithelial barrier. Breastfeeding also can have an effect in early life. Lack of antibiotics, obviously, you don't want to take antibiotics if it's not necessary. If it's necessary, absolutely, but it could be disruptive if you take antibiotics when it's not needed. Sometimes taking fermented food like kefir, kimchi, yogurt, you know, all of this can add to the microbial diversity and help. For the environment, you know, exposure to soil, exposure to outdoor environment, exposure to pets can affect the microbial diversity positively. Living in a farm or living in rural areas was shown to correlate with less asthma, less allergic diseases. So all of these factors and mode of delivery, C-section versus vaginal, can also affect the microbial diversity. So all of these factors are important. But I think the question was also why diet is not enough, because it's too complex. So the microbiome is too complex. Would you like to?
Yeah, exactly. It's too complex, and sometimes also our genetics. Our genetics doesn't allow certain bacteria to thrive. So we need to help. There are some functions that are not naturally present in the microbiome. And so what if we can reintroduce them? What if we can retrain our microbiome, introduce those functions that they're missing, either introducing those bacteria, because now we know the mechanisms, and then we can reintroduce those functions, or and then retrain the immune system. So sometimes you can eat amazing food. You can be exposed to the best environment, but still your body, you know, like, or maybe because your family wasn't passed along through your family, then you don't get those bacteria, and so like we need to find a way to be able to reintroduce those functions, and those kind of like, I would say almost like I would consider it almost like a gene therapy, where you put it in genetic material that aids like repairing something that is missing in one of your organs. Microbiome, even though they are bacteria, it's an organ for us. And so you have to consider that as an organ that works as your heart, your brain but it's made by other cells, but they need us to survive, and it's kind of a crosstalk. And so when they're missing something, we can go and try to repair it, basically.
It's a gene therapy or a transplant therapy.
Exactly, transplants. Exactly.
I'm already hearing so many wonderful things that we've discovered about the microbiome in the last few years. And Ilana told us that the Food Allergy Fund is launching a microbiome research collective to bring together labs. How will this kind of collaboration help further this field? Do you want to start, Dr. Kimes?
Sure. I mean, we're living in a modern day of everybody talking about AI. And what that helps me talk about here is specifically complex data. You heard the reference to how complex the microbiome, that is the opportunity and the beauty of what we're all trying to understand and apply, is it will allow us to address more complex multifactorial chronic diseases. And the tough part about doing that is getting enough data so that you can really, truly, deeply understand the mechanisms that are happening. And it's hard to do as individual companies or researchers to really get that amount of data. The flourishment of AI from large language models is because they had the internet, right? And they had all of this access to data around language. We need that kind of big data to be able to really fundamentally understand and get to a position where we are doing targeted precision medicine through the microbiome. So it helps support a movement towards that direction from my perspective.
And I think if I can add also, the beautiful component of it is the ability to bridge different expertise. And so this is something that it's lacking very much in research sometimes, because people are silos, they work in their own specific area, and they don't bridge. And the breakthrough science comes through connections. When you look at things from different angles, you get experts from different part of the problem, and you look at the problem as a 360 angle, and so you get a stronger science. It's better, it's easier to understand the mechanisms. Because for example, if you have a lot of data, but you don't have the right people looking at those data, and really there is kind of a conversation, scientific dialectic, where people talk and then trying to figure out the mechanisms to then develop therapies. I think it's, even with data, we are not able to achieve to find therapies or to achieve to understand this complex system. And I think it's the combinations of the ability to bringing together hospital, patients, data from patients, and research center with different expertise that they can come together to create something novel and more innovative. And I think that's something that Ilana and the Food Allergy Fund has been able to achieve, that I think it's outstanding.
Yeah, I agree. I would add also that, particularly it will bring together immunologists, microbiologists, genomic people, and clinical trial experts. So that's very important because, as you mentioned, in the lab, usually we focus on one particular domain. So it is important to bridge all of the technical expertise together in transcriptomics, in genomics, in metabolomics. It's extremely important. And also, I think it is important to be sure that we have some reproducibility, because something at the population level, because what could work in a center might not work in another. So we have to standardize the protocol. We have to sit together and agree on what is relevant, what is not. And finally, I think it will open up the door for large clinical trials, hopefully, because ultimately that's the aim, clinical trials in humans. So I think it's an excellent initiative. It will accelerate discoveries.
Yeah.
Ilana also mentioned an idea that I think is really interesting, which is that food allergies could be the canary in the coal mine for other chronic diseases. Do you think, are we able to say scientifically that the microbiome is a shared denominator between food allergies and diseases like asthma and eczema and inflammatory bowel disease? Dr. Rhonda, do you want to start?
Yeah, actually, yes, that's true. That's true, because it's what allow us, when we look at food allergy, allow us to look into how the microbiome can train the immune system. And the immune system is involved pretty much in everything. And so being able to use food allergies as starting point to understand these mechanisms, that we can then expand it into other disorders or diseases, it's really important. And so it really becomes a model system to study, would say a microbiome immunomodulations, and how the microbiome train our immune system, and how we communicate, what signals are involved, the window of time that we need to, we need to look into if we wanted to intervene for being able to, rewire the immune system. And this is something that I think has like far long implications in many other disease, autoimmune disease as well, like any type of autoimmune disease as well. Like it's just pretty much in the immune system regulates so many aspects of our life, even during developmental aspect. Like the immune system can affect the way our brain develops as well. So like there are like so many implications that along the line that this can really open new area of like where we can apply the knowledge that we get from studying food allergy into other other disease or diseases, which is very exciting.
I agree.
Yeah. I would highlight, I'm somewhat biased because we at Shelter Therapeutics really focused initially on what is often referenced as the atopic march, but it's really the comorbidity of type 1 hypersensitivity diseases. So think atopic dermatitis, food allergy, allergic asthma, allergic rhinitis. All of these have the same underlying immunological cascade that is occurring. So the beauty of the opportunity here is that if we're actually getting at the underlying cause, we should be able to actually prevent that entire cascade from happening. And that's something we've been very focused on over the last decade, is trying to prove that point.
I agree. And I also would like to point out that food allergy is very common. It's extremely common, and it's bizarre, right? Because we don't expect people to react to food. And I have to tell you, I mean, I did I got my MD from the American University of Beirut. I saw only one patient with food allergy. I came to Boston Children's to do immunology. I was shocked to see the number of food allergic patients. I was shocked. So what is interesting about food allergy is that it is so common that we can study it at a much bigger scale. And with this, we can understand other diseases, because in all of these diseases you mentioned, there was dysbiosis, which was a disruption in the microbiome. There was also this disruption in the metabolites. So, and this will lead to the change in the immune system and the immune tolerance. Regulatory T cells will be affected. And depending on which organ is affected, we might either have an increase in the atopic pathway, the allergic pathway, or the Th2 cells, or we might have an increase in the Th17 pathway, like we see in inflammatory bowel disease. I also would like to say that the epidemics of food allergy came kind of like similar to the epidemics of autism. So autism also is implicated in food allergies, and there are fecal transplant trials that have actually shown very promising signals. So in autism. So I think when we write these trials, believe me, we go back to the literature and we look what happened in ulcerative colitis, what happened in autism, and we write our food allergy trials accordingly, and vice versa, because we are all learning from each other in this particular domain. And this is the fascinating part. The food allergy one brings something very interesting, which is, 10% of adults are affected, 8% of children. It's a huge opportunity to understand the microbiome, and it manifests early in life. Huge opportunity.
Yeah.
You've all been at the cutting edge of this microbiome research, and but we still have this situation where, as you said, food allergies are very common. So what gives you hope right now, and as you look to the state of the science? Dr. Rashid, do you want to start us off?
What gives me hope?
Yeah.
Okay, it was in around 2013 that we got interested in the microbiome, or maybe a little bit before. And at the time, we were just collecting poops from babies and driving to get their poop every 4 months, making sure that we get them and we evaluate them. But then after we found that there is a mechanism, and that was it was published in Nature Medicine, Aza Abdelgadir from Tala Shatira's lab. The mechanism, we found the ROR-gamma T positive Treg cells, and now we found that the goblet cells are producing REN-beta, which actually can be targeted and could prevent or treat food allergy. And we are doing fecal transplantation trials. So when we started designing the trials in 2015 and 2016, believe me, many of my esteemed colleagues looked at us as if we had two heads and a unicorn or something. If you look now on clinicaltrials.gov, you will find hundreds of studies in many diseases evaluating fecal transplant. So these are cutting edge trials. I really have to applaud the Food Allergy Fund as well as other food allergy organizations that supported us, because all the studies we're doing are not federally funded yet when it comes to trials per se. And what gives me hope is that we already found a signal in adults. They are very difficult to treat. Adults are very difficult to treat. So we already found a signal. We already found that there is a chance of increasing the threshold dose of reactivity by giving them a single dose of fecal transplant. What gives me hope is that we are now collaborating with the University of Minnesota. We are using a highly concentrated form of fecal transplant. And there are capsules now that open up both in the upper and in the lower intestine. So we can actually evaluate the whole microbiome and the effect of these capsules, because we're using capsules that are odorless and tasteless. The patient they take them home now. They take them home, put them in the fridge. So we are we are milestone away from how we started in 2013. And what gives me hope is that there is a lot of open-mindedness now about the microbiome and the importance of doing clinical trials in diseases and in food allergy.
And Dr. Kimes, I think you have some news that gives you hope this morning, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, I am a scientist at heart, and data is what gives me hope. And we've spent the last 10 years, as I mentioned, really trying to get to the place where we could have clinical data showing that a microbiome-based targeted treatment provided over the first year of life could actually prevent allergic diseases. And we have just had our last patient complete their last visit last month in our ADORED trial, which is a phase 2 proof of concept study in which we use a defined consortia of bacteria based on all the observational studies that we have talked about previously. And we have seen in the participants that completed the full year of treatment per protocol that we actually see a 64% reduction in risk of physician-diagnosed atopic dermatitis and a 77% reduction in risk of physician-diagnosed food allergy at 1 year of age. We will continue to follow these children. Well, we had continued to follow the children, but we'll have the data from year 2, which is an observational year. There's no more treatment, but we will be following them to learn more about the durability of this approach. But the data makes me think we're on the right track and that we may be able to actually prevent these diseases in the future as we move forward.
That's great. And
Yeah, I'm echoing this wonderful news, which it's very exciting. That gives me hope. And also what gives me hope a lot is also the visionary, the visions or the foresight that actually Food Allergy has started with this microbiome collective that has put together scientists from different areas where now we can look into the molecular mechanisms. So we thought a lot about fecal transplant, which it works, it does work, but it's less reliable because you can control it. You're just taking these fecal matter and hoping that it's going to work. We're working now with consortia that is more rationalized, so we actually pick the right bacteria that we know they are producing a certain metabolites, and that will actually end up having the effect. And so we're kind of working more towards a more rationalized approach. And so the idea is, so for example, at the Innovative Genomic Institute, in our case, we go even further than just putting together a consortia of bacteria. We figure out we look at the genes that they are responsible, the metabolic pathways that are responsible of the phenotype, or they're responsible of the improvement into let's say food allergy, and then we introduce them we sow them into the microbiome. So we introduce them into the native microbiome that you have, kind of like a personalized therapy. And so working together with immunologists and other experts in the field, we are understanding together the mechanisms, and then we sowing back the functions that we are missing in the microbiome. And so it's kind of like the next generations of therapeutics, where now we go as a gene therapy directly. That's the gene they're missing. We're gonna put it into your microbiome, and that's something that it's just like you're not introducing new bacteria. You're not going into the understanding these consortia that sometimes they're difficult to maintain for life because they're not adapted to your own microbiome. We are reintroducing the functions that you're missing, kind of like a real, kind of like a gene therapy style. And so working together with the expert in the field here in understanding the mechanisms and then re-put them back into like people's microbiome, it's kind of the next generations of therapeutics. And so this gives me hopes because the ability to collaborate with wonderful colleagues in understanding these mechanisms together and then create personalized and precise, safe therapies, it's something that just like it makes me extremely excited and gives me really hope in the future for therapies in this area and more.
Well, we've heard a lot about 3 different approaches and some amazing science. And why don't you join me in thanking these researchers?
Thank you for all your insights and expertise. I am very hopeful about the transformative potential of gut microbiome research for food allergies and related diseases. Next, we're honored to have with us FDA Commissioner Dr. Marty Makary. Dr. Makary is the 27th Commissioner of the Food and Drug Administration. Before leading the FDA, he was a surgical oncologist and professor of medicine at Johns Hopkins University. He is the author of more than 800 scientific peer-reviewed papers and 3 best-selling books on healthcare and public health. Commissioner Makary, thank you.
Alana, it's great to be here, and it's great to be with like-minded people who are interested in the microbiome and other things that have not gotten the attention they deserve. So thank you for your important work. I'm a huge believer in this as a frontier of medicine. We've got to explain what's going on. There's something happening in our lifetime. There's been a mass explosion of food allergies, and we didn't see that 2 generations ago. You didn't see it in other countries until they adopted some of the US recommendations for avoidance of certain foods and new Western exposure. So something is happening that we have yet to really unlock. But we do have some very interesting clues. If you go out here 30 minutes west to Fairfax County School, you'll see that in that very large school district that there is a very high rate of food allergies, including peanut allergies, to the point where some kids have to have complete abstinence of peanuts anywhere around them. And people mock that, but that is a real thing. Somebody just opening a product with peanuts in their proximity can put them into anaphylactic shock. And so they live a very different life, and it's cruel for a child to have to insist with somebody at an ice cream store that they have to use a fresh scooper because any cross-contamination from another ice cream flavor could actually put them in anaphylaxis, and the young person who's serving it thinks that they're being petty. It's a very, very difficult life. You didn't see this 2 generations ago. And if you go to Fairfax County School District, you'll notice that the incidence of peanut and food allergies is extremely high, but not among the international students, not among the students from families that recently immigrated to the United States. This is a very internationally diverse region of the country. And there are many kids where English is a second language or they don't speak English in Fairfax County schools. And you'll notice that in that population, the incidence of peanut allergies, in the words of the school health officials, is essentially 0. So what's going on here? Well, in the 1990s, we observed that there was a slight increase in peanut allergies But of course, when there's a slight increase in something, but the media puts a lot of attention on it, people perceive that it's a higher increased rate of growth of that condition than may represent reality. And it's not just peanut allergies, it's shark attacks. You know, there's been basically no change in shark attack rates, but every year it seems like they're on the rise. And that's because if you see somebody or hear the testimony, then it's scary. And so it creates a perception. Well, there was both a real increase in peanut and food allergies in the 1990s, but there was also a massive increase in the perception of it. And some of that was good. There needed to be awareness. But the American Academy of Pediatrics at the time felt that they needed to respond to the public question, what can we do to prevent our child from getting a peanut allergy? And they responded with a document that was put out by their nutrition committee that basically said peanut product avoidance in the first couple of years of life. And I went back and had asked people, why did you say that? What science was it based on? In transplant surgery, we've known for a long time that there's a principle called oral tolerance or immune tolerance. That is, when you're exposed to an allergen early in life, that you're less likely to reject that allergen as your immune system is forming. Well, they hadn't talked to anybody in that field. They did not know that literature, and in sort of the ignorance of groupthink, issued this decree, which is could make sense to somebody who doesn't understand oral immune tolerance. And that ignited a modern day peanut allergy epidemic. It started right around the time of the year 2000, when that recommendation was put out. And of course, it became a perpetual vicious cycle, because if the more kids got an allergy, then you avoided peanut butter or peanuts in that family or that classroom or that school district, and then less peanut allergen exposure would further increase the peanut allergy rates. So it became this vicious cycle, and it wasn't really until a doctor named Gideon Lack had done a famous study called the LEAP study, and it was hard for him to get funding to do that study. Well, we know this is true. Why would you want to study it? And probably the same logic behind a lot of the groupthink mistakes of modern medicine. And well, we know this is true. Why would you do this? This could sow doubt in the field. What if you get a result that goes against what we already know to be true? You know, and we see these arguments in many areas of medicine. We saw it with the opioids are non-addictive dogma that we got wrong as a medical field for 15 years. People were saying, waving the flag in the air, hey, the science is not consistent with this. Well, I would attribute some of that. So finally, Gideon Lack got that study done in 2013 to 2015. You saw a massive realization that the moniker that was put out in pediatrics residency programs that was designed to be an easy to remember chant that would be recited by every pediatrician and family medicine doctor counseling a parent who has an infant. Remember, 1, 2, 3, don't start milk products until they're 1 year of age, don't start eggs until they're 2, and don't start any peanut butter or peanut products till they're 3. And that became the dogma. So it really was not until 2015 that they realized they had gotten this tragically wrong. So we're still reeling in from that mistake. Now, there's another piece to this besides early antigen exposure that we don't talk about that we need to talk about. And it's not just with food allergies. It is with so many areas of medicine, because we're learning gut health is central to overall health. And it is the microbiome, this garden of over 1 billion different bacteria, not cumulative total, but different types of bacteria that are central to health. And if you have inflammation of your gut, that's going to cause some minimal dilatation. And if you have a clinical background, one thing you may know is that the most painful things in the human body is pain from something stretching. So when a ureter, a kidney stone blocks the ureter, people think it's the sharp edges that cause the pain. No, it's the dilatation from the obstruction. When you have a gallbladder attack, it's the dilatation of the gallbladder. When you have a bowel obstruction, it's the dilatation of the bowel. And talk to anyone who's experienced any of those. Those are the worst forms of pain in the entire human body. Well, what's happening when our microbiome is altered? It's increasing inflammation, and that's causing some dilatation. Now, it's not an acute inflammation. It's a very low-grade dilatation, and it's constant. It's always there. And there's a lot of factors driving this, but when you're a 4-year-old or an 8-year-old, it manifests as just being sad. That's the clinical manifestation of that phenomena. And so what you have is people where their gut health is not optimized, and then it leads to a whole host of other medical problems. We also know that the microbiome is producing things central to health. It makes vitamins, it makes clotting factors, it makes serotonin, which is involved in mood. You've heard of serotonin. 90% of your body's serotonin is made in the microbiome. What's happening when we alter the microbiome in the modern world? Antibiotics can carpet bomb parts of the microbiome, resulting in overgrowth of one type of bacteria. And a study out of the Mayo Clinic that was recently published showed that kids who took antibiotics in the first 2 years of life had a higher rate of chronic diseases, from allergic rhinitis to obesity, compared to kids who did not have exposure in the first 2 years. Why is that? Well, it may be because their microbiome has been altered. Now, the average 2-year-old has already received over 2 courses of antibiotics in their brief 2 years, sometimes in the first day of life, just as a precaution. And we're now trying to have better antibiotic stewardship. But we're not treating the microbiome with respect, and it may be because we don't really understand the microbiome. There's no research in the microbiome, very little research. I talked to the microbiome unit at the NIH. It was like a couple people. This is like the frontier in health. And so it may very well be that there's an intersection between microbiome and peanut and food allergies. And that's what a group of researchers at Harvard Medical School believe. When I spent some time listening to them, and it's amazing how much you learn when you listen to folks, that they believe that there are some microbes that are deficient in people with food allergies. And they're trying to get more granular to find out which types of microbiomes are missing in people with certain types of food allergies. I think that's some of the most exciting work that's being done. And your group is funding it. And so for that, I want to say thank you. This is very important work. We need to focus on the important central issues to health that we have not been talking about that we need to talk about. And so this administration's committed to looking at these issues. We talk about these things with NIH funding priorities. We talk about them at the FDA, where we have an intersection with some of these open biome type groups out there that are doing work in the microbiome, and they have products before the FDA. FDA sometimes hasn't known what to do with these products. What do you do with a pill that has 1 million microbes in it? Are we going to regulate each microbe separately? Are we going to regulate it for one condition, or recognize that if people feel better, maybe that's an outcome that we can recognize? Are we going to require randomized controlled trials for every microbe that could be? We don't do that with probiotics. So what's the line between what we regulate and don't regulate? These are the active discussions that we're having. But I do believe very firmly that gut health is central to overall health, and we have missed the mark when it comes to recognizing the principle of oral immune tolerance. So with that, I just want to say thank you. Thank you, Alana. I don't know if you have any other points you want to make. I know we're going to hear from some others in our administration, our head of the ARPA-H program. But anything else you'd like to add? Okay, great, great. All right, thank you for your work. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McCary. Next, I'd like to introduce ARPA-H Director, Dr. Alicia Jackson. Dr. Jackson became the director of ARPA-H last month. At our annual summit in April, we welcomed ARPA-H leadership and are proud that the Food Allergy Fund is an ARPA-H Investor Catalyst Hub member. We're excited about the next phase of ARPA-H's involvement in food allergies by bringing its unique high-risk, high-reward model. Dr. Jackson joins ARPA-H from Evernow, a company she founded and led as CEO focused on transforming women's health and longevity during menopause. Previously, she served as a program manager and subsequently deputy director of DARPA's Biological Technologies Office, guiding an investment portfolio across biodefense, novel medicine development, and biomanufacturing to protect the nation while advancing groundbreaking scientific capabilities. She has served as a Senate policy advisor as well as co-founder, board member, and advisor of several biotech and health startups. Dr. Jackson holds a PhD in material science from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Dr. Jackson.
Good morning. Very happy to be here. I want to give a big thanks to Alana and the Food Allergy Fund for bringing everyone together here around a topic, as Dr. McCary said, is really growing into a crisis. And we don't seem to really understand at a root cause level what is driving it. We have a lot of hypotheses. But there does seem to be what I would call a valley of death between the very basic research that's going on and the commercial technologies available today. And that's really where ARPA-H plays. For those of you who aren't familiar with the ARPA model, I want to give a little bit of a background here so you can really understand where we fit in the ecosystem of innovation, not just within the federal government, but really in the private sector as well. So who here is familiar with even DARPA? Okay, quite a few people. I did have the privilege of serving there for 5 years, both as a program manager and then launching and becoming deputy director of the Biological Technologies Office. And it really is what I would say the crown jewel of the US research and innovation enterprise. It's unparalleled across the world. One of the really unique things about it is that it can take on risk and fund very large problems in a way that neither the federal government traditionally nor the private sector can take on. And I know that even more deeply, having been in both now the federal government and the private sector, especially in a place where food allergy sits right now. There's a lot of hypotheses that are very risky to go after and to put big dollars after. We tend to fund a lot of point solutions or a lot of basic research, but clearly there is something underlying all of this that we're seeing in immunology overall. And at an ARPA, whether it's a DARPA or an ARPA-H, you can start to ask the big questions, which is, what if? What if we could literally tomorrow flip a switch and reset everyone's immune system so that they don't have a food allergy, they don't have an immunology issue? Those are the really big questions that we want to go after here. ARPAs work in a very different way, and part of the reason I'm saying this to all of you is because I need your help. We need your help at ARPA. Unlike a lot of different research agencies, it's very much not top down. I'm here, I set the direction. We want to create breakthroughs in human health that actually change the course of human health. We set big directions, defeating disease, ensuring that our children live a decade longer than their parents, and ensuring that this nation is protected against whether natural or engineered biothreats. But really the program ideas come from our program managers. These are exceptional individuals. They can be from academia, industry, startups, even government labs where they might have worked before. The only requirements is that they are deeply technical. They have an incredible passion that they will break through a brick wall to achieve. Things that everyone else might say, oh, it's going to take too long. There's no way we're going to be able to do it. They're the people with the vision who say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to bring every single resource to the table. I'm going to be able to work with startups, academia, large companies, nonprofits, and make sure that we come together and put enough funding behind this and a very strong technical direction that not only can we make what seems impossible probable, but we can create an entire field, an entire community that can continue beyond us. The other unique thing about the program managers is that they're on a timeline when they come and work for us. Everyone gets about 3 years. So the day that somebody shows up, the clock starts ticking. What that means is that every day counts when you're an ARPA program manager. And it's that kind of drive when you wake up every morning and you think, what happened today? What progress did we make? Are we actually moving forward? That creates this incredible sense of urgency and enables us to truly be a time machine. We take something that we hope will happen in the next 20 or 30 years, and we ensure that it can happen within possibly the next 5 or less than 10. That's why I'm very excited to be here, because I think food allergy falls right into this category. And in order for us to go fund that, we need phenomenal program managers. If you have people in your networks, academics, who are willing to come and spend a few years here, or people from industry, or a startup founder who wants to come and literally make the biggest impact of their entire lives, not just for, a startup scale or a paper, but really to drive forward an entire field, this is the place to come. Now, you have to be kind of fearless, a little bit crazy. My own experience was that when I showed up at DARPA, I started talking about this crazy thing called engineering biology, now known as synthetic biology, and everybody thought I was nuts when I showed up, and that was 15 years ago. But now when we hear it, we don't think about it as some new crazy thing off in left field. It's actually a field of science. And that's what we can do here, which is we can take these bold ideas, things that maybe don't follow medical dogma, things that seem just beyond our reach or require close collaboration between the microbiome community, between immunologists, between potentially other fields that we haven't even been thinking about, and bring them all together. Once we have that program manager, they're off to the races. They bring together the best people across the world to work on this problem, whether that be here in the US or some of the countries that we have deep collaborations with. They can choose anyone. We have incredible contracting flexibilities, unlike those in any other place in the government. It's known as other transactions. But it basically enables us to not just give money and say goodbye and hope it went to a great place, but actually to give very focused, significantly sized dollars, 10, 20, 30, 40, up to 100 or $200 million towards an area, and it allows us to manage it incredibly responsibly. We can turn that money off, we can turn it up, we can switch directions, whatever we need to do, whatever that program manager needs to do to help that community go towards a goal. One of the things I know we've been working with the Food Allergy Fund on is being able, and the Food Allergy Forum, is to be able to understand what are those key things that we need to move forward on. We're in the early days of those. We've identified broad areas. But what we need at this point is some incredible people to come into ARPA-H, to sign up and say, I want to make a huge difference here. I want to move this field forward. I want to make the future happen sooner, especially for every child today that may only be 2 or 3 and starting to suffer from these, so that by the time they're 10 or 12, this no longer has to be an issue for them and their families and wherever they go in life. I just want to close with, I'm very grateful to be leading this agency. I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to go tackle giant problems like this one and work together with the community and the best researchers in the world on it. I want to work with all of you. Please come to ARPA-H. Please come talk to us, talk about the ideas, and go out into the community and also tell people about this incredible agency that if we get the right people in the door, we can make very big things happen. I've had the opportunity of working at DARPA, where I myself have been able to see really things that were impossible, not only become probable, but actually go into the field, out into the world, and make a very large difference. That is what we're offering here. I'm very grateful to everyone here. Thank you, and I'd love to talk to you further.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. We'll now take a coffee break in the Lincoln foyer, and the program will resume promptly at 10:15. Thank you.